This is the beginning of a national ban. Don't let them use your desire to get rid of abortion to trap ourselves into massive government overreach. If it makes it to the level of the Supreme Court, next culture war is against birth control, hormone replacement. They decide that a certain vaccine should not have been FDA approved. There are so many sweeping implications. Undermining entity that keeps our medications safe, a very dangerous maneuver. There is a current decision pending for a lawsuit which was filed in Texas that could drastically affect access to a medication commonly used for management of miscarriage and induced abortion, even in places where it's legal. Even people who are opposed to abortion should be closely following and, in my opinion, vocally opposing this. Despite the judge in this case encouraging both legal teams not to publicize anything about these hearings, I think the precedent that a potential favorable ruling could set is incredibly important for the general public to be aware of. Let's talk about it. Mifepristone is a medication on the docket here. It's an anti-progesterone tablet that's used typically in combination with another type of medication, either for induced abortion or the treatment of a miscarriage, and is typically used in the first trimester, though there are other applications for it as well. A subset of the group, Alliance for Defending Freedom, has filed this suit against the FDA, claiming that the medication Mifepristone was not sufficiently proven safe prior to it being FDA approved back in 2000. For reference, Tylenol kills about 600 people in the United States every single year, and this is 13 over the course of 21 years. So I find it curious that when we talk about this lawsuit, you're going to hear them arguing that this medication is not safe enough to be FDA approved, while Tylenol is over the counter. It does not make comparative sense. I'm editing, and I wish I would have said here that, in my opinion, the comparison doesn't make sense for the reason that this was not filed on a concern for the actual safety of the medication. For reference, the ADF is a religious and political activist group. They've been labeled a hate group by the SPLC for some of the things that they advocate for, and they are highly funded to the tune of $79 million in 2021, and they paid 0% taxes on any of that, for what it's worth. Instead of paying taxes, they allegedly use their money doing things like providing legal funds to someone who is trying to remove custody from a child's parent because she is a lesbian, or giving advice to political activist groups in Belize on how to make sure gay sex remains a criminal offense punishable by 10 years in prison, or even making sure that businesses in the United States have the right to discriminate on who they provide services to. And most recently, they have used that tax-exempt money to file a suit against the FDA, claiming that Mifepristone should not be approved for use in the United States. They've done something here called forum shopping, which is really common with these activist groups, where they look for a place to file the suit where they are pretty well guaranteed a favorable ruling. For this one, they chose a district in northern Texas that is overseen by a judge named Matthew Kacsmaryk. I do not know if I am pronouncing that correct, and quite honestly, I'm not sure that I care. He interestingly oversees the district where I was born and raised and where I went to medical school, and he shares a lot of the ideologies of the ADF that we discussed earlier. The reason that they chose his district is not purely because he shares the ideologies of the ADF, it's because he shares the ideologies of the ADF, but also he's the only judge in this district. So filing there means they are guaranteed that it will be heard by him. There is absolutely no other relation to Texas for this suit. This district and my state were chosen purely because he's there and he will hear it, and they think it will be ruled in their favor if he does. Before I jump into the Texas case, let me explain a little bit about Mifepristone and the current regulations that are around prescribing it in the United States. Mifepristone has been shown repeatedly in studies from around the globe to be safe. Mortality rates, meaning your risk of dying related to the use of Mifepristone, are about 0.53 in 100,000. Although if you look at the report that number comes from, it's actually probably quite a bit lower, like 0.27 in 100,000. The reason I say that is because in their report, they looked at 21 years of medication use. They found in that time frame 26 deaths, but if you break down those deaths, 7 of those were related to drug overdose or intoxication, meaning illegal drug use, not the Mifepristone, 3 from homicide, 1 from suicide, one from a known underlying health condition, and one from a pulmonary thromboembolism or a blood clot in the lung, which is a risk of pregnancy itself. So that's technically 13 deaths in 21 years over the course of 4.9 million medication uses for a death rate of 0.27 in 100,000. For reference, pregnancy has a mortality rate of about 8.8 in 100,000, which is 15 times higher. Penicillin has a mortality rate of 2 in 100,000, which is 4 times higher. And interestingly, Viagra has a mortality rate of 4 in 100,000, which is 8 times higher. When you look at morbidity or serious adverse events related to the use of Mifepristone, you're looking at a rate of about 0.8%. This is going to include things like hospitalization or need for a blood transfusion, infection, things like that. These are almost always treatable without long-term sequelae or problems. And if you took those parameters and applied it to pregnancy as a whole, you would be looking at a risk of a serious adverse event that was tens, if not 100 times higher than the risk associated with the use of this medication. They've had the hearings to hear this suit last week as of the time of filming this, and the judge has not issued a final decision yet, but it's expected that that will be coming quite soon, possibly even this week, so it may happen even before I get this video out. But I want to go through some of the things that the ADF claimed. Claim number 1, the ADF has claimed that mailing Mifepristone should be illegal on the basis of the Comstock Act of 1873, which says Mifepristone is obscene material which should be illegal to mail. US DOJ countered with a whole slip opinion, which I will link in the resources down below. To sum it up though, they said that it would be inappropriate to make mailing a medication illegal in a particular jurisdiction due to the multitude of legal ways that the medication is used. Claim number 2, Mifepristone is actually unsafe and should have never been approved in the first place. The DOJ countered and basically said there is absolutely no legal precedent for removing a long-standing FDA approval on a medication, and that makes sense, right? That's why the FDA exists. They review that data and they remove approvals or add them as is appropriate. Besides that, we've already established that this is patently false. This medication is used around the world, and we've gone through the actual safety data here. This was first approved in France in 1988 after 2 very large clinical trials showed that it was safe. And no data has come out since then that would make us think anything other than that. Claim number 3, the FDA failed to study the safety of this medication and ignored harmful side effects. There are many studies on this. I will link a lot of resources down below if you want to look into them, but it's just patently false. Claim number 4, an increase in complications has caused other patients in emergency rooms to suffer from a decrease in time, attention, and resources from their doctors. Myself, and probably the DOJ, responded by saying, thank you for sharing that very interesting and baseless thought that your brain had. Please do come back when you can support it with any data. Claim number 5, because of this medication, doctors have lost the opportunity to provide medical care through a pregnancy. The medications are both so unsafe that patients are being hauled in by the truckload, necessitating the use of our services to the point that we are not extending care to other patients and simply ignoring them, but also we're losing business because of them. Kaczmarek appeared in the hearings to be, unsurprisingly, quite sympathetic to the claims being brought forth by this activist group, but again, he is yet to issue a final decision as of the time of filming this. That being said, in the likely event that a favorable ruling comes out, the next step will probably be to appeal. It certainly will be appealed. And that would likely elevate the case to a Louisiana circuit court, which is known to be also quite conservative. That was likely also in the plan when they were doing the forum shopping for where to submit this. Upholding there could potentially mean that this precedent-setting ruling would end up in front of the Supreme Court. As far as abortion goes, make no mistake that this is the beginning of a national ban. If they can get Mifepristone pulled from FDA approval, that means that even in states where abortion is still legal, you won't be able to have access to this medication. I said earlier that I think even people who are opposed to abortion should be vocally opposing such a ruling. And the reason is because we don't have a precedent for this. If it makes it to the level of the Supreme Court and gets approved as precedent, the implications for that are massive. It could mean that these highly funded activist groups will decide that their next culture war is going to be against birth control, or maybe they decide that a certain vaccine should not have been FDA approved and they bring a suit against that, and suddenly no more mRNA vaccines. It could be against hormone replacement, which is used for a huge variety of different problems, from premature ovarian failure to menopause to trans people and a myriad of conditions in between. There are so many wide sweeping implications that a favorable ruling, especially if it elevates to the level of the SCOTUS, could cause. And I think we should all be really wary of both who is funding this as well as what the broader implications are. Don't let them use your desire to get rid of abortion to trap ourselves into being okay with massive government overreach. There's a reason the FDA and their team of scientists and experts review this data and make these decisions. And there's a reason that we don't have a history of lawsuits like this, because this isn't a safe manner of decision making. The person who will issue this decision is not capable of assessing the actual medical necessity or safety of this medication. They are operating completely out of bias, and that's not how judges are supposed to operate. But when you have a biased organization that's incredibly highly funded, bringing the information to people they know will agree with them on the basis of bias, that is not a democratic way of making decisions. And it's also not a safe way for assessing what medications people have access to. This is an unreasonable legislative attempt to take control of medication safety away from medical entities and put it in the hands of highly funded activist groups, undermining the entity that keeps our medications safe and access to them effective is a very counterproductive and dangerous maneuver. I ask that you pay attention to what's going on, and yeah, I don't know. That's all.